Hi everyone, I am Nancy, So Cozy Stitching. If you would like to follow me on Instagram, I am also So Cozy Stitching over there. And if you just go down into the drop down box, you can see my Instagram handle, and also I put my email in there. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Today is November 16th, 2020, and this video is a special video about my quilting journey and my quilts. So there is no stitching. So if you only watch me for the stitching and are not interested in in my quilts, then there will be no stitching in this video. Okay, so I'm gonna try to make this not as long as it could be. I'm going to talk a little bit about my quilting journey, and I'm going to show you some of my quilt tops that I have the tops done, but they have not been quilted. I am not going to show you any finished quilts today, with the exception of one at the very end. And because I want to show it to you now, because before I make another Flosstube video, this quilt will have been gifted to somebody. So let's start with my quilting journey. I have only been a serious quilter for about 6 years. So I'm relatively new to quilting. I am going to say my skill level right now is a intermediate quilter. A year ago, said I was probably a advanced beginner, but I feel like I'm now an intermediate quilter. Everything I have learned about quilting has been from retreats, has been from the internet, YouTube, Facebook groups I'm in, the internet, and magazines is how I learned how to quilt. I did know the basics of sewing. I took sewing in 4-H back when, 8, 9, 10 years old, right around there. But in 4-H, you learn the basic steps of sewing, and I think I made clothes. I made a nightgown, and I think I made a skirt one year. And then I took home ec in junior high, and I took home ec in high school. So I took it, I think, for 2 years in junior high and then 2 years in high school. So that kind of, just kind of added on to my sewing knowledge. But that's about it, because then once I was done with home ec and that, I didn't sew after that. And then when I was married to my then husband, and we were just, we had a small family. We had 3 little kids under the age of 5, and I did own, did I own a sewing machine back then? I think I may have borrowed my mom's, and then I think I ended up getting one for Christmas, just a really cheap one. And so the first quilt I ever made, I don't remember. It was 25 plus years ago, and I didn't know anything about, good quality quilting fabric or anything like that. Plus, I didn't have the money for stuff like that. So I think I saw the pattern in a magazine, is what is going to be my guess, because this is before internet. And so I thought, okay, I can make this. I know how to sew. I'm going to try this. So I used that magazine. I went down to Walmart because I was poor and I didn't have any money to buy good quality fabric. I went to Walmart and I bought fabric, and this is my first quilt I ever made. It is actually called Jacob's Ladder. It it's a pretty big quilt. For your very first quilt, it's a pretty big quilt. It was a very, now I would say it's a very easy quilt. At the time I made it, it was very, very hard to make. And I didn't know anything about lining seams up or getting your points right or anything like that. So if you look close at this, it is, I'm going to show you that right there. See? But you know what? It's my first quilt, and I did it all by myself. I did not have anybody help me. No one taught me how to quilt. I didn't have anybody to talk to ask, am I doing it right? So anyway, my first quilt I ever made. I really should get this quilted. Maybe I'll leave it. It's been stored in a tote, and I pulled it out actually for this video. But maybe I should leave it out and get some backing for it and have it quilted. All right, so then about the time I finished that quilt, we had a quilt store open up in our area, and it is a very well-known quilt store. A lot of quilters know about it. All over the country, people know about it. We have people come from all over the country to this quilt store. It's a huge quilt store, and they were doing a block of the month. And the premises of it is that you would, for $5, they gave you the very first pattern and the fabric to make the first block. And then the next month, so that you went in on the first Saturday of January, you paid your $5, you got your fabric for the first block, and you got the pattern for the first block. Then if you went on the next month, the first Saturday of the next month, you would get, and showed them your completed block, then they would give you the pattern and the fabric for the next block, and you would just continue that all through the year. At the end of the year, you would have 12 blocks that all you'd have to do is buy sashing fabric, border fabric, and you could put it together and you'd have a completed quilt top. I did really good, I think, for 8 or 9 months, and then I don't know what happened, but I think the last 3 months I ended up, because if you didn't have the completed quilt block, you could still go in and just pay $5 and get the fabric and the pattern for that month. So I completed 8 or 9 blocks, and the last 3 months I didn't even finish it. I didn't even finish like making those blocks. I think I did end up with the patterns and the fabric. I don't know where they're at now, but I never did finish it into a quilt because this kind of came to the end of that part of my quilting journey. So I'm just going to quickly go through these squares. Again, had no idea what I was doing. None. So I was just following what the directions said. Not that great of a job, as you can see. And when I go to square these up, if I decide to put these into a quilt and go to square them up, I'm going to lose my points. There's just no way around it. I think these squares are 8.5 inch squares. So yeah, so anyway, I've never put these together. I really should. I just have them sitting in a box. There have been several times I thought, oh, maybe I'll just get rid of them, but I haven't. And I think maybe I'll just make just a little quilt out of them, maybe like a doll blanket or something. And this is the last one. Okay, so that ended that for quilting for me. So like I said, this was probably, and I'm going to say that those blocks were probably made in 1996, 97, right around that time. Right around that time. Then I stopped quilting. Um, I enjoyed that, but I didn't have anybody to help me along the way. I didn't have, um, I didn't. And plus, quilting is an expensive hobby, and I was still poor. My kids were still little, and we just didn't really have the money for me to get into an expensive hobby. Um, Cross stitch was something I started 30 plus years ago, and I've continuously cross stitched through my entire 30 plus years. There have been times that maybe I've taken a month off or whatever, but I've always cross stitched. 1997, that was it. So then fast forward so then I took up, in the meantime, I took up scrapbooking. I did scrapbooking and all of that stuff. About 2000 was it 2000? This is bad because I don't remember. 2010 or 2011, I got divorced. And that kind of put the kibosh on my scrapbooking. I mean, it went from like I was scrapbooking every single day to I didn't even want to look at the pictures anymore. So I stopped scrapbooking. It was just like, it was night and day. Stop scrapbooking. And then I decided for Christmas that same year, I wanted to make each of my kids and my grandkids, however many grandkids I had at the time, a Levi quilt. And I had been collecting Levi's for years, so I had a ton of them. So I made everybody that year for Christmas a Levi quilt. This is one that I made for me, and I never finished. So this is not big. It's just one, you could throw over you if you're sitting on the couch or whatever. My thing was, if I was to go camping, I would take this. When I made these, I just used Levi's and flannel, just sewed them together, and then I tied them. These weren't even, when I made all of them for my kids and my grandkids, they weren't even tied, or weren't even quilted. They were just tied. And so this one, I have the top done. I even have the backing fabric for it, but I never did finish it. So anyway, so I did that about 2010, 2011. I made those Levi quilts. Then, like I said, about 6 years ago is when I started to get serious into quilting. My only hobby at that time was cross stitch. That was all I did. And I was at a point in my life that I could actually afford to buy fabric and pay for quilting. Sorry, pay for quilting, somebody to quilt them. My tops did get built up because I had to save up money for quilting because I was single, and I had expenses. And so, my tops did kind of pile up, but I did. So I started quilting again. The whole thing is to say about 6 years ago, I started getting back into quilting, and I started getting in very seriously into quilting. Now, I'm way deep into quilting. Okay, so the quilts I'm going to show you today are in no particular order of when I finish them. I'll tell you the little, my history about them, of why I've made them, why, what I've used. To my best of my knowledge, I will give you the information that I can. One thing I do want to show you is I bought this. It's called Scrappy Project Planner. This one is by Lori Holt. Fat Quarter Shop does have one that is similar to this one, And I did buy it thinking I would switch from this one to that one. But I think what I'm going to do is fill up this one first, then start the fat quarter shop one. Because this one, not only does it have a place for, putting all your information, like your quilt names, your start date, your end date, your quilt size, block size, how many blocks, who you've given it to, your supplies and that. It also has, there's place for notes. It also has place if you want to sketch out quilt blocks or whatever. And then it has like a weekly planner, and this was from, I don't know if I can, well, it's not dated. It's not dated, so I mean, it could be whatever. This is not available anymore, I don't think. Anyway, and then in the back, it has, quilting tips, and then it has quilt patterns. So really, this, for what I'm using it for now, really doesn't, I mean, because I don't need a lot of the other stuff in here. But I decided to go ahead and just continue with this one until it's full, I think, because I'm not switching everything from this one over. So what I've done, let's see if I can show you a good example, is in here I put, the quilt name, I put information like who it's by, if I used a fabric line, where I bought the fabric from, all the information, and then I put pictures in it. So, and I don't have, like, I still need to take, there's some, like, I need to take a picture of the quilt from this one because it's completely done, but I need to take the picture from it. And then in the back where it has these, the weekly ones, I have like table runners in here that I've done, and tree skirts and table toppers. And then I also have quilts that I've made that necessarily don't have a whole lot of information on them because they were made before I started my quilting journal. So anyway, so if you have any questions on any of these quilts, if you'll just ask me in the comments below, I'll try to give you as much information as I can as I'm going through them. But if you need more information, ask me in the comments and I will do my best to answer the questions. This is not, I still have some quilt tops that are in progress that I'm not going to show you. And I have some quilt tops that I have completed, but they go with other quilts that are already completely finished, quilted, binded, everything. And so when I show those quilts, I'll show you those tops. And who knows, by the time I do that, they may be finished too. So one thing I will say is I am really good at making quilt tops. In July of this year, I decided I had too many quilt tops built up. I needed to get them quilted. So I've been taking them in. I was taking one in, and then when that quilt was finished quilted, then I would take another one in. And then, but my quilter is about 6 weeks out from, if I take one in, it's going to be at least 6 weeks to get it back. This time of year, it could even be longer, especially since the quilts that I have taken in, with the exception of one that's there now, are not, I don't need them before Christmas. So I've given my quilter permission that they can like bump one of my quilts if they need to get somebody else's in who just needs to get theirs for Christmas. So what I was doing is I was taking one in and picking up one. And then I thought, yeah, if I'm only taking one in every 6 weeks, it's going to take me like 2 years just to get those quilt tops completed. And then that's just not adding on other quilts that I am making. So I decided, so right now my quilter has 4 quilts of mine. I just took my quilter's cottage, which I showed in my last Flosstube video that I was working on. I did finish it and my quilter has it. So she has 4 quilts of mine right now. One is a Christmas gift. The other 3 are just ones that I've just taken in. So I'm 2 weeks getting a quilt back. So I'm still taking one every time I take one in. I am picking one up. So I am picking up quilts about every other week, every 2 to 3 weeks, right on there. Okay, so I will show you the quilt top that I have and the backing fabric that I have for them. And I'll give you as much explanation as I can about them. Okay, first one I'm going to start with is this is a scrap quilt. Everything from this quilt was pulled out of either my scrap bin, all the flags were out of my scrap bin, or my stash. And on this one, the background was pulled out of my stash. So I have bought absolutely no fabric for this quilt. This quilt can be found, it's a free pattern. It can be found on Pat Sloan's blog, I think. If you just type in Pat Sloan, it brings up her blog, and then also brings up, I think it's called ilovequilts.com or something like that, which is also her. Anyway, you can find this pattern on her webpage. It is 3 flags across and 4 flags down. When I was putting this together, I was following the pattern. Once I got it all together, I decided that it was not big enough. So I went in, pulled out some more scrap fabric. I still had some more of this, a little bit of this left in my stash. So I added a border, and I think it's a 3-inch border, 3.5-inch border that I added to it. And I added just a strip on each. There's no rhyme or reason to this border at all. No 2 borders on this quilt are alike. So, what else can I say about this quilt? I think if I was to do another one of these, I would probably do it 4 flags across and 4 flags down, rather than 3 and 4. So yeah, this one was a total scrappy quilt. I did make this year, and it is a lap size quilt. Most of my quilts are between lap size and twin size. And this is the backing fabric that I chose for it. Most of my quilts, I'm going to say probably 80% of my quilts, I use woolly flannel on the back. I live in Idaho. It's cold here 9 months of the year. So, and I like flannel on my quilts even in the summer. That's just me. I just like the softness of it. And I'm going to say that my quilting style is eclectic. I don't have a quilting style. I like prim. I like, the Civil War reproduction fabric. I like that whole spectrum. I also like the like vintagey fabric, like Lori Holt type fabrics. So I'm kind of all over the place. I'm the same with my stitching. I don't have, I don't just stitch prim stuff. I don't stitch just, I'm kind of all over the place. So it's the same with my quilting. All right, the next one I'm going to show you is, what was this called? I think I have it in my book here. This is called Dandy Flower. I started this in 2017. It was a free sew along, and she released, I think it was a month long or 2 months long, but she released a section I think it was a month long, because I think one section, 1 week was the flower, 1 week was the stem, 1 week was the butterfly, and 1 week was the setting, I think. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know who did this so long. I think it was through Facebook, some group I belong to, not sure which. The fabric line was called Gingham Girls by Penny Rose Fabrics. Amy Smart with Penny Rose Fabrics. Now, I will say with fabric lines, this fabric line came out probably in 2016, 2017. You probably, unless you can find a quilt store somewhere or on Etsy that would have this fabric line. Fabric lines, you typically do one printing, and then once that fabric's gone, it's gone. This is a big quilt. I'm just going to have to show you parts of it. Hopefully you can see that. See if I can open it up just a little bit. Maybe get a little bit more of the picture of it. So, this quilt, what can I say about this? It's cute. There's one of the butterflies. Flower. I was going to hold it upside down. Flower. So anyway, and then what I did is I had leftover fabric, so I did just a small scrappy border on it. And then I also had enough, I'm going to do the binding in this. Typically I use the binding I usually use the backs, fabric that I've left over from the backing to do the binding. But once in a while I switch it up and do a scrappy binding. Or a scrappy, border binding, both. So, this is, let's see. This is the backing. This one I have had a hard time finding backing for. And I finally settled on that one. So, and this was made using a fat quarter bundle and then yardage for the background fabric. All right, the next one I'm going to make, or I'm going to show you, was a retreat class I took. See if I can find the information. It was called Daisy Patch by It's So Emma, Fat Quarter Shop. But the class I took was at a quilting retreat. And the fabric I used is Sweet Tea by Sweetwater for Moda. And here it is. This one I started in 2019, and so I started in June of 2019 and I finished it in June of 2020. So just this year. So that's one block right there. And in the pattern, they call for these all to be the same fabric. I made mine scrappy. So every red flower has a blue center and every blue flower has a red center. And what else can I tell you about this quilt? I do have so what I've started doing when I have leftover fabric from a quilt that I make, I will use it and make another quilt. I have not made another quilt with this one yet because the fabric I had left over from it is all blues. So I didn't have any red fabric left over. So I haven't decided what I'm going to do with that. I might just keep it, and then when I do another patriotic quilt, pull it in. And this is the backing I got for that quilt. So, and it is flannel. All right, the next quilt I'm going to show you. This was a sew along with Fat Quarter Shop, and from July, from their Jolly July, they did a stitching. They did a stitching side and they did a quilting side. This is the quilt from the quilting side, and I'm going to show you just part of it because you could just do the center of it, or when you were done, they had different borders you could add. So this was called Jolly Snowflake. It was free. It was a free sew along. And it's supposed to look like a snowflake, right? Well, when I was doing it, I did this setting, this block right here, wrong. So these two were supposed to be, actually supposed to go this way. So the blue is supposed to be here and here, and white here and here. When I realized it, I would have had to take the entire block apart just to switch that around. So I thought, yeah, it's whatever. It's my creative, I added my creative touch to it. So mine does not look like a snowflake, which is okay because I chose fabric from my stash. I did not buy any fabric for this quilt. If you will see, I had enough of this fabric for the center, but then I decided when they sent out all their border settings, I wanted a border. So I added a border. To mine. You can see that. Because I wanted it to be a little bit bigger. So there's my border. So if you'll notice, the red in my border does not match the fabric to the red in my main piece, which is okay because it's a scrappy quilt. So it doesn't have to match, right? Anyway, so when I was doing the border, my border was not coming out right. I followed the instructions. I don't know what I did wrong. I have no idea what I did wrong. But, so I was supposed to have another one of these stars here. And I made it, in all my corners. I was supposed to have another one of those. But my borders just weren't, I don't know if they were too long or they weren't long enough. I think they were too long. And I don't know what I did wrong. I seriously don't know what I did wrong. So I just put squares in there. Yeah. Anyway, so this is still on there. If you go to Jolly Jabber, that's their blog, Jolly Jabber, and you can go in there and this is in there, and it's still free. You can still download the pattern, and then it gives you a link in the pattern to this border, because this border was by Laundry Basket Quilts. So there's a link in there to go to this border. So there's that quilt, and this is the backing I got for it. So anyway, when I was doing the border, doing those border stars, I did make them, but since they didn't fit, I had extras. So I went ahead and made this. And it's not very big. It's maybe 15 inches by 15 inches, if that. So I'll just make it into a table topper. So anyway, so yeah, you don't ever throw away what you have left over, because you can always use it for something else. All right, now what do I have? That one I'm not gonna, okay, let's see. This one was also a class I took at a retreat. This was a mystery quilt. So when I signed up, for the class at the retreat, you were given the cutting instructions, but your fabric, you were told to buy X amount of a light fabric, X amount of a medium fabric, and X amount of a dark fabric. And then the instructions say, okay, cut from the light fabric, cut this and this and this. From the medium fabric, cut this. From the dark fabric, cut this. So then when we went, so we didn't know what the quilt top was going to look like when we went into this class. This was a fun class. So she walked us through step by step. She says, okay, take like the 4-inch squares of your medium fabric and the 2-inch squares of your dark fabric, and this is what you do. And so anyway, so yeah, it was an all-day class, and she showed us, we didn't get the whole top done, but she showed us like portions of it, so that we, in the end, when we got home, we could just pretty much finish those portions and then get it all sewed together. So this is not my typical colors. Because it was a mystery, I didn't know what was going to go where. If I knew now what I knew then, I would switch my gray and my green and have less green and more gray, because those would be more of my colors. And then for my border, I just picked out this coral color because it can match that. So Mystery in the Mountains is what it was called. I don't think I have any more information than that. Let's see. Than that. That was it. I don't even remember the name of the teacher. So I like it. It's really kind of bright. Not my typical colors. And like I said, I would switch, so it wouldn't be so bright, I would switch the green and the gray. And then because it's so bright, this is my backing for it. Again, it's flannel. All right. The next quilt I'm going to show you is this was a sew along I started with Fat Quarter Shop. It was a paid one. It was one I had to pay for. So what they did is January, they would send you all the fabric and a portion of the quilt, and that went that way through June. So it was January through June of this year. And I know I've showed parts of this. This is what the entire quilt looks like when it's completed. Other than these are not grayed out. This is all very bold colors. This is Kim Deal fabric. I love it. So like I said, I like all spectrums. This is more, primitive fabrics. So the entire quilt will look like this when it's finished. This fabric is just for this outer border. So I have January and February done. This is one of my quilts that is high on the list. I'm going to, I got a couple more quilts that I am working on. I probably should show them in my regular video. But when I get them done, I think I'm going to pull this one out and finish it. This is called Esther's Bloomers. So the first month was this center block. No, it wasn't. The first month was, I think, this center block. Like, maybe like that. I don't know. I can't remember. And then the second month was kind of adding, plus the first month, I think you cut these out, but you didn't add them in. Then the second month was some of these stars, and then all of these little 1-inch, when they're finished, they're 1-inch squares. There's like 100 of them there, if you can believe that. There's more than 100, I think. No, there's probably, I think there was 100. So anyway, so this is, yeah, this is not a completed quilt top, but it's a start. And like I said, this is one that's going to go to the top of my priority list because I want to get that one done. Because I've signed up for two other ones that one started this month and the one starts in January. This quilt is not a beginner quilt. Not even close. I would say intermediate. Intermediate. Definitely not beginner. There is a lot of teeny tiny pieces there, and I have to, and as you can see, I have not even, this quilt's hard. So, but once I get it all together and get it quilted, you won't even notice those little imperfections. But I have to, my stitch length, I have to shorten my stitch length, and I have to pin, and stitch slow to get things to be right on that. All right, the next one I'm going to show you is embroidered. I started this one in June of 2016. She put out a new block every week. I'm sorry because I don't have any idea who did this one, who did this so long, who the designer was. Excuse me. And all I know is it was all for the whole summer. It was one block a week for 12 weeks, and then it had the setting. So it's, I think, a 13-week. I think it was 13 weeks. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe it was 16 weeks. No, it would have been longer than that because 1, 2, 3, 4. It was 20 weeks because she did one block a week. Anyway, whatever. This was back over 4.5 years ago, so I don't remember a whole lot about it. I don't have these patterns anymore because if I had the patterns, then I may be able to go back and give more information on it, but I don't have the patterns. So I'm going to show you each one of these blocks individually. So there's the first block. And it was all around bees. Kind of bees was the theme. So every block had bees in it. So each of the blocks was an embroidery. I wanted to not just embroidery on them, I kind of wanted to add to them. So I've added buttons, bee buttons to all of them, and then I've just added some other little embellishments. So this is the first one. And I've added the bee button. These are buttons in the center of these flowers, and then these are fabric buttons. Buttons that are made out of fabric. And then this, and I don't even know if these are in the order that she released them. I just don't know. These are little English paper pieced patterns or pieces. I think this is the first time I ever did it. I had no idea what I was doing. This is English paper piece, and I've never done it. But I just put them on there, and then I just embroidered around them to attach them to my backing. I embroidered the little, whatever this is that the bees make, when they're flying through the air. But this is a iron-on patch for that bee. I did not embroider that bee. And this is all hand embroidery, not machine, which I have done machine embroidery. I have a couple of quilts with machine embroidery. My arms are getting tired. There's that block. This one I did do satin stitching. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I satin stitched, put little beads on the end, add another bead button. This was a crocheted fabric or a crocheted flower for my scrapbooking days. I just sewed it on there. French knots. Nope, those are not French knots. Those are cross stitches. And then another bead button. And then there's this one. Again, the bottom flowers are buttons. The sunflower on top of the beehive is an iron-on patch. I did cut some of the petals off of it, so it would be round at the top. I put mine and my husband's initials in the tree. Next row. That one. These flowers, I used yo-yos. I can't remember. I don't think they used yo-yos. I think they did something else on their flowers. I don't think she embroidered them, but I think she did something else. And I thought, oh, yo-yos would be really cute. So I made the yo-yos, just added fabric, and then just added buttons in the middle. And then I just embroidered the stems. The next one is this one. I embroidered the cat. I freehanded and made a hat out of felt, bow tie out of ribbon. The mustache was a iron-on patch, and then another bee button. This one is the cake. So the sunflowers are iron-on patches. The strawberries are iron-on patch. I sewed rickrack on. I think this was supposed to be embroidery, and I just did rickrack. And then another bee button. And then this one I did according to how she had it, except for I made my beehive shapes different colors. I think she did like brown and yellow, more of the honeycomb colors, and I did colors. And another bee button. And then this one, the watermelon. I used a piece of fabric for the blanket, the picnic blanket. I think the pattern, you embroidered it. And then I added the little button, made a flower. And then the bee. And then this is the next one. Again, iron-on patches, some buttons for the flowers, a button for the bee. And then the tail is poofy. And I did follow her instructions to make it that way when I embroidered that one. And then the next one is the tractor. Flowers, buttons, and then the bee button. And then this one is beehive. Again, I used an iron-on patch for the sunflower rather than embroidering it. On hers, these where I put these were embroidered, and I just used a patch. Again, I cut some of my petals off so it was round at the top, and that one is an iron-on patch also. Then the next row is the kite. I don't remember if she used fabric or not, or if she had just stitched hers. I used fabric, and then I just used bows, ribbon, and tied bows for the kite tail, and then again bee buttons. This one, the cupcake. This is a button, strawberry button, but on the top. This is another one of those fabric buttons are made out of fabric that I just sewed on. And then the button. And this one. This is a button, flower buttons. I think most of these places where I had buttons was all embroidery. And I just chose to put buttons on it rather than do the embroidery. And bicycle. I did do the flowers in here, but I feel like it needed more, so I added some button flowers. Before I had done this quilt, I don't think I years ago I did some embroidery, but nothing like this. So anything that was a specialty stitch in that, I didn't want to do, because like those flowers in this bike, a lot of the was like lazy daisy stitches and satin stitches and all of that, and yeah, wasn't doing that. All right, there's that one. I did use fabric for the centers and then rickrack for the stems. I can't remember if she had it that way or not. And again, bead buttons. And then the barn. I made a brand using my last name and my husband's last name, and I kind of just, because I didn't change I just barely changed my name. I've been married for 4.5 years, and I just barely changed my name for reasons that had nothing because I didn't want to. It's because of we were going on a cruise and I had a passport, and so everything had to be the name. And anyway, but now we get a new driver's license and I've changed my name. So anyway, so I just when I made this was right after we first got married, and so I just combined his last name initial and my last name initial to make that brand. This is a button. This is also a button. Looks like a little quilt square. Somebody made this for me, and I think it was just a gray button, and then they took fabric and put on it to make it look like a quilt and put Mod Podge over it. So, and then the next one, we're just about done with this quilt. Next one is this truck. Again, all the flowers in the back of it, and then I just added buttons. So, and that truck it's teal. I don't know if you're showing up. And then license plate, I put 2016, so that's when I made this quilt. And then this is the last one. So the last one that she had, she used her last square as a label. And I can't remember, this was not it. I can't remember what it was, but it was a bee, and I think it was embroidered. And I chose to take out of my Vintage Farm Girl by Lori Holt book. And I did the 6-inch bee. And then I embroidered my initials and the year I completed it. So this is the quilt. And I think I just used a charm pack for the setting. And then I think this fabric was fabric I had. And then I had this charm pack that was bee themed, so I just used it. This quilt has not been quilted yet. And the reason why is because I wasn't sure how to quilt it. And because you can't do it all over because I have all those buttons and everything on there. So, plus I didn't want quilting over my embroidery. So, but I have talked to my quilter since, and I think I can do a custom quilting, and I think I'll just have her quilt like inside the sashing and then maybe around the insides of the blocks, but not actually on the embroidery itself. So for this one, this is the backing I got for it. Again, it's flannel. This is not a quilt I would ever use. It would be one you would hang up. It's not a quilt you would use. All right, we are about done. So the last quilt I want to show you is the top is completed. It's been quilted. I still have to put the binding on it. But the reason I want to show you in this video is because by the time I do another video, I will have given it to my son. Okay, so quickly a backstory on this one. He wanted a Crown Royal quilt. Crown Royal quilt is a quilt made out of these Crown Royal bags. And he gave me a bunch. He did not ruin his liver drinking all of this. I will tell you that. He had friends that saved him for him. He had a friend that worked at a bar, saved these. So that's how he collected all of these. He had over 100 of these bags. I have saved this one last bag because I'm going to use it, and I'm going to cut this out, and I'm going to make a label to go on the back of the quilt, you know, saying that it was made for him by me and all of that. Now, a Crown Royal quilt, this fabric sucks. I'm just going to say it's sucky fabric. It's not good fabric to make a quilt. This is kind of a velvety, flannelly type fabric, but it is not, it's a cheap fabric. This right here is, I was told, I don't know, because before I made this quilt, I did chat with a few people that have made these types of quilts on Facebook, and they said you really couldn't use this because it melts when you iron it. So I don't know, and so I didn't want to use that. He wanted me to take these and tie the quilt rather than having it quilted. He wanted me to use these to tie it. Well, you can't, because once you cut these, it just unravels. So I ended up having to figure out, basically this is my own pattern. I had my daughter sit down with me because Nancy and math don't get along. And so I had my daughter sit down with me, and we figured out what size of squares to cut out. And I think she ended up helping me cut some of these squares out too. Excuse me. Anyway, so basically this is my own pattern. I'm sure that if you look on the internet, you probably can find this pattern, but maybe the measurements aren't the same as what mine is, because my squares had to be small enough that I could use the usable part of this fabric, because it's not, you know, it goes down but then it curves in. So it's not like, you know, up here where it's all one size, you get down here and you have less usable fabric here than you do up here. So I had to figure out how to cut this out. So my measurements are not the same. This pattern you may be able to find on the internet, but the measurements are going to be different than what my measurements are. I think my blocks ended up being 8 inches. When I was making this, I told my son, because he wanted a queen size quilt, and I says, there's no way you're going to get a queen size quilt, because I can't use all of that. Because I didn't want to use this entire bag, because I could have used the back fabric here too, and the fabric on the, you know, the sides between the stitching. I could have used that, but I didn't want a quilt that was going to fall apart on him. And I don't think if I made a quilt using this as the majority of the fabric that it would last. So I just took and cut it just this part out of that fabric. The rest of it is quilting cotton. Another thing is, a typical Crown Royal quilt has yellow in it. He didn't want yellow in it. He says, I want it to have gray and black. That's all he wanted. And then this would be the purple of it. And I said, well, it's got to have a little bit more color than just gray or black, because this is not my typical quilt to make. This quilt was really hard for me to make, to get motivated to make it, because it's not my typical colors. It's not my typical quilt. Plus, I am not good at coming up with my own pattern. So anyway, but this is, between my daughter and I, this is what we came up with. This is a huge quilt. He wanted it to be queen size. I said, there's no way. But once I started putting it together, it's 80, let's see, I measured it the other day. It's 89, maybe 89 inches by 100 inches, I think. Right around there. It's right around there. So it's bigger than a quilt that I normally make. And I'm not going to be able to show you the whole thing. So I'm just going to show you a part of it. That'll give you the idea of what it looks like. So there you go. Bring it in closer. So I just had the quilter do a meandering on it, meandering stitch on it. Got little fuzzies on it to stitch it or to quilt it. This is what I chose for the back. Again, little strings. These are not on there permanently. So this is, and I am using the same fabric to bind it. This quilt is so big, I can't bind it on my sewing room table, or where my sewing machine is set up in the cabinet. I'm gonna have to bring it out here to this table, clear everything off of this table, set my sewing machine up here, and do the binding on this table because this quilt is so big. But yeah, like I said, I wanted to show you this, even though it is, you know, all it just needs the binding, because I'm going to give it to my son on Thanksgiving Day. So he knows about this quilt. It's not like this is a gift, because, you know, he gave me the bags probably 4 years ago, and I had them in a tote for 2 years, and then I finally decided, you know, I need to get those out. So I got them out, put them in the washer, washed them a few times, because you want to get, I put color catchers in there because you don't want them to bleed. You know, once you get in your quilt, you don't want it to bleed. So, and I knew that this fabric would bleed. So I washed them probably 4 times, and then they sat in a tote again for a while, and then I thought, you know what, I need to start making this, and so I decided to start putting it together. And then I started, and I got a lot of the blocks done, and then it sat again for a while, and then finally I just decided, I think it was this year during quarantine, I'm like, I got to get this goal done. I got to get it done. So I got it done, and then it sat for a while, and I thought, because it took 9 yards of backing for this quilt. I think that's what I ended up buying. And I have 9 yards of backing, but then there's enough for the binding also. And then I have just a little bit left for something else. But yeah. So anyway, so he's going to be excited to get it. When I first started this, I told myself, put it together. I'll buy all the stuff for the top, but you have to pay for it to get it quilted because it was going to cost a lot. But I went ahead and had it quilted for him, and I'm just going to give it to him. And so he knows he's getting it. He just doesn't know I have it, and he's going to get it right now, or by Thanksgiving. So anyway, there you go. That is some of my quilting. Not all of it. These are just quilt tops that are ready, that I had the backing fabric for, and they're ready to go to the quilters. When she calls and says I have a quilt ready, I'll have another one of these ready to go, and I'll take it to her. So I will do another video with some finished quilts. As you can see, I have this ladder right here. It's got quilts on it. This is the Halloween quilt. In here, I have many more quilts. So I will do another video with like maybe fully finished quilts, that are completely quilted and have the binding on them. As I get my other quilts back from the quilters and I get the binding on them, I will probably just show them in my regular videos. Unless, I don't know. I may just do a separate one with those ones too. I don't know. Anyway, so this is the first, and there will be a couple more for sure, because I still have a lot. I have a lot to show you, and um, I didn't show you any of my quilts that are, other than my Esther's Bloomers one, I didn't show you any of my quilts that are in progress, that are in various stages. Um, I have some quilts that are quilted, but they don't have binding on them, and I didn't show you them. And I have a couple of quilt tops that are just the tops that I didn't show you, because I think when I show you, anyway, there's backstories to them that are related to other quilts, so I'll show them at that time. So anyway, I'm going to let you go. I want everybody to have a happy Thanksgiving, and I will be back towards the end of the month with a stitching update. Bye.